Okay, so actually, before I do that, so I just remember the camera's there. So
I keep trying not to look at myself in the camera. No, in the screen. You know what I mean.
I'm going to leave that in.
No.
Yeah, it's like Scott keeps trying not to look at himself.
No, right, but like the screen is here, and then the camera is over here, and it's like I look at.
You can't help but look at yourself, is what I heard. Okay, so
back
welcome.
To zero.
No. This is like 0 plus 30 seconds now. We're doing an update here from my backyard before we do NDC security over there.
Yep,
we
just
can
that
almost
building.
see the building. Almost see the
QT.
building. This is like not rehearsed, but we've got the palm tree and everything. We're about to have like jet ski in the background as well, because this is just like a normal part.
Typical backyard problems.
Typical backyard Aussie problems. Now, before we started recording, and you were talking about how much you like looking yourself in the videos, we were just discussing NCSC, National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. Do you want jet ski? Turning around,
We've literally just come to.
going the other way. So yes, you've
Just
been.
want to crash
That was
us.
like a perfect spot too, just within that one little section frame. Back to business. NCSC. Do you want to explain who the NCSC is? And I'm going to pull up the thing. that
The
they did
National
this week.
Cybersecurity Centre. So they're actually a division of GCHQ, which is our spy agency in the UK. So like our NSA kind of thing. But they were, whilst they're a division of GCHQ, they're not. I don't know. Like from my perspective, they're not like part of GCHQ in the regard that they're not the spying agency. So they're basically there to help people with cybersecurity. They provide good advice, good guidance. They work with organisations within the UK to try and help them on their cybersecurity matters.
And I think that's an important point. So they do a lot of consumer-facing stuff and a lot of organisational-facing stuff as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And you and I both met a bunch of people from there. And have,
Yeah, I've been down there.
have
They're
friends.
really good. They've got some really good blog posts that I share quite extensively on Twitter. They're really good reference points that I always go back to because the material that they produce is really good.
And this is, I guess, in a way, it's a bit unusual in the traditional sense, because we normally think of governments as being like sort of quite behind the eight ball when it comes to InfoSec. I first met some folks there a couple of years ago when I was doing a talk in London. And in fact, that meeting then led to the relationship that Have I Been Pwned has with them, where we're doing monitoring of all the .gov.uk domains, which then led to the Australian relationship and the Spanish relationship. Also, it's all very nice. And just tangentially, and I'm sure you'll back this up, this isn't something we rehearsed, but every single time I meet someone from government, whether it be the NCSC folks or people elsewhere, like they're always just like awesome, epic people, aren't
Yeah,
they? They're
I
just
think
super
that's
nice
fair.
people.
Like government has a bad rep, and I've spent time contacting the government and the finance sector, which is really similar. And the organisations and the entity like the NCSC might not have, like government departments don't have the best reputation for being on the ball, but it's not the people in it. Like they're kind of paddling their feet as hard as they can under the water and kind of raging against the machines. But the people themselves have always been really, really good.
Yeah,
in my experience.
top-notch people. So anyway, NCSC reached out to me probably a few weeks ago now and said, look, we're going to do a bit of a post about passwords, and we're going to sort of talk about the difficulties that people have in choosing passwords insofar as they're not very good at choosing passwords. And they asked if they could get their hands on the top 100,000 passwords from Have I Been Pwned's Pwned Passwords. Now, I've got 551 million passwords that anyone can go and download, or that you can do a search for using the K-anonymity API. All of that, though, in terms of downloadable stuff, is SHA-1 hashes, and SHA-1 is obviously not the way that we want to store passwords. The problem is that I would have very happily just gone like, here's 551 million plain text passwords, were it not for the fact there's a bunch of people that use PII in their passwords.
Oh no.
And by PII, it's like not just their names, but their email addresses. So there's that. There's also the fact that because I take this data from data breaches, hackers not always the best at cleanly formatting their data breaches. And sometimes when I've gone through and extracted passwords and it's like, okay, this is a comma delimited file, they haven't consistently comma delimited it, and I could be trying to extract passwords and I could end up with email addresses. Yeah, there is I'm quite sure it's a sub 1%, but there is a number of records in pwned passwords which are not cleanly formatted passwords, and it doesn't matter because you're only using it to sort of block bad passwords. So if one of the records in there is like, instead of just being a password, it's like the entire row of comma delimited email address, password, phone number, whatever else, unless someone uses that exact string as a password, and good on you if you do, because that's a pretty epic one. it's not a problem anyway. But that's why I didn't want to do it in plain text. So the NCSC said, look, can we get like the top 100,000 in terms of prevalence in plain text? And I sort of said, okay, well, look, if it's the top 100,000 out of 551 million, it's going to be stuff that's appeared many times over.
Yeah.
So the chances of it being PII are way down there. Here it is. You guys make sure it's okay. So they published this. The date they've got this on this is 21st of April. Titled Passwords Everywhere, and they go through and sort of talk about why password reuse is a problem, and then of course go through and talk about the fact that here's 100,000 passwords in plain text that they're making available. If you can make use of an external service or options such as Troy Hunt's Pwn Passwords API. Now it's always nice to be an NCSC.
Why not a million?
Why not a million? Why not 2 million?
Like, million passwords.
Where do you stop? Look, I guess they thought that was, 100,001. Like, okay, that's a nice round number. The top 100,000 is enough for, after they publish this for a bunch of organisations, new media outlets, etc., to sort of go, and here are the most popular football teams as passwords, and the boys' names and the girls' names, and, whatever sort of spin media wants to put on it. So, anyway, so that's sort of pretty consistent with the sort of stuff the NCSC do in terms of useful consumer-facing things, and by useful, like I hope a bunch of organisations take this, and one of the things they can't do just with my Pwn passwords list because it's all already SHA-1 hash. I hope that they take this and they go, hey, we've got high work factor bcrypt everywhere. Let's take this and see if any of our passwords or any of our users' passwords are in this top 100,000 list. If so, we're going to write them an email or something like that. So anyway, that's the NCSC. Now, while I was speaking about Pwn Passwords, and I think I mentioned this to you the other day, that Pwn Passwords API is starting to really, really take off. So I noticed it's up to about 10.5 million hits a day now, which is cool. So I shared that stat the other day. And the super cool bit as well is that the cache hit ratio from Cloudflare was at 98.4%.
Cache hit ratio.
Oh, you say cache, don't you? Aren't we
I
meant
say
to be
the word
British?
correctly, yes.
Really? What do the Americans say? Do Americans say cache or cache?
They must say cache.
Do you say data or data?
Data. It's not the cyborg in Enterprise. It's like,
anyway, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. So, all right, you know what I mean? The thing where it doesn't actually have to go through to the origin, because this is kind of the important thing. Also, I noticed today, actually, I was looking up the stats. Do you know how many edge nodes Cloudflare has around the world now?
Oh, it was like 150 something last time I saw.
Well, last time I saw it was like 160 something, and then today I was talking to someone and they're like, here's Cloudflare, and they got 106. Oh, there's 175 now. So they now have 175 edge nodes around the world. So the cool thing is, and if I don't think you saw this tweet, it was probably a couple of years ago now, where Matthew Prince, the CEO, said our goal is to have 99% of the world's population within 10 milliseconds of a Cloudflare edge node. And I think they wanted to get to about 250-ish in order to do that. But I noticed that a lot of the recent edge nodes have been like in more sort of regional US-based cities. But it's just getting like another point of presence that much closer to a large slice of the population. So yeah, getting a 98.4% cache hit ratio is super cool because it means that 98.4% of the requests are being served from Cloudflare, which means that 1.6% of the requests are being served
into the origin
from the stuff that I actually pay for.
And is this the text files in Blob? Is that one? Or?
Well, yeah. So if let's talk about the mechanics. So 98.4% of the time, based on that traffic, you're going to make a request which is served by Cloudflare Edge Node. So it's going to be somewhere really close to you that returns the result. 1.6% of the times it's going to hit an Azure API, Azure Functions API, which is serverless, which runs on servers. But anyway, let's not get into the semantics of what serverless means. Now then, when that needs to actually pull back the record, it actually goes to blob storage. So what that means is that there is a file, and it's just a .txt file. It sits there in a blob storage container, and that gets picked up from the file system. And this was one of those things where I kind of went through a couple of iterations to get this as optimal as possible. But when you think about the way this search works, it uses the k-anonymity implementation, which means that if you want to search for a string, you SHA-1 hash it, and then you take the first 5 characters and you send that to the API. And what that means is that because SHA-1, each one of those first 5 characters is hexadecimal, you've got 16 to the power of 5 different possibilities, which means you've got 1.1 million roughly, different possible requests that you can make. The cache hit ratio is so high. In fact, someone asked me when I tweeted it, they're like, does this just mean that everyone's using like the same password? Or very close to it. It's like, no, not really, because there's only like 1.1 million different possible requests that you can make in total anyway. And that space is sort of enough for Cloudflare to cache load.
Multiple in the response, so it could be one of...
Exactly. So if you do a request for password that begins with the SHA-1 hash of 00000, Have I Been Pwned is going to come back and it's going to be like, here's 500 different possible suffixes. Anyway, you Google that, you'll find links to it. But to answer your question, it's picking up from blob storage because all I need is like 1.1 million text files. So when I do an update to Pwn passwords, I literally generate 1.1 million text files. I drop into blob storage. I decided to do that rather than table storage because when I tested it, and I did actually write a blog post called Here's Why Pwn Passwords Are So Fast, it's actually super quick to go to blob storage and just pick up a .txt file by name. And not only is it super quick, it's also super cheap to run because I'm a little bit tight when it comes to my cloud costs. So yeah, the 1.6% that does actually hit the origin, well, it's really fast. I'm really interested to see when the things, I mean, let's say it's 6 months from now, for argument's sake, it's 20 million a day. I wonder if that cache hit ratio will be much higher.
Well, if the pool of potential requests doesn't grow, then it should be, I would say.
Well,
like if you're, because it's
right,
20
if there's still
million
only
requests against the same thing, right? So you would think so. I would think so.
You'd think so because there must be, there's cache, there's a purging of cache, right? But and I guess this depends on how they do their cache purging as well. And it's not necessarily simple because some of this is tiered cache as well, where they can have different edge nodes around the world which will cache it and then feed it to other edge nodes. I only realised this.
Oh, so they share it. They don't all like cache what they see from the origin.
That they can share it. Yeah,
okay.
It depends on. I know Jenard, who you know. I see
Yes.
April on Twitter. I see April did a lot of work around what's the best way to optimize cache in terms of both alleviating the load from my side and also making it fast on the consumer side. So anyway, I guess my point is that if it was twice as many requests, you're probably more likely to get a greater range cached in each edge node as well.
You'd hope so, yeah. I would have thought that would be the case.
Because, I mean, let's say it's twice as many requests and you request the same hash prefix twice, well, it's already cached once, and then the more requests we get, I just think the higher the cache hit ratio is likely to be. So
yeah, I would
anyway.
agree.
All right, so that's Pwn Passwords. I'm really stoked to see that. And of course, if you're paranoid and you don't want to request Pwn Passwords via the API, I had someone after I tweeted this said, if we're
I'm giving you all our passwords.
You're not giving me the password. Jesus Christ. They said, we've got compliance obligations under HIPAA, so it's a healthcare related application. We can never send you anything. Now, putting aside the semantics of you're still not sending me anything useful, it's like just download it. This is what GitHub does. Like if you log onto GitHub with a password and Pwn Passwords, GitHub says, look, it's in Have I Been Pwned, you probably shouldn't use it. Download it, I don't care. All right, so moving on. Did you ever end up listening to the Reply All podcast?
No, it's
Dude,
on my...
I told you to listen
No,
to
I put it on my podcast list, but it's like I'm behind on my podcast list.
It's because you've been sitting around under palm trees drinking beer, basically. So I did not know about the Reply All podcast until I did an episode on there maybe 18 months ago. So they did an episode called The Russian Passenger, and essentially it was actually a really interesting thing. So they said someone's Uber account was being used to take Uber rides in Russia. Now that wouldn't be surprising if you're like from Russia, but this guy was not from Russia. He was someone in the US. And they were trying to figure out, like, how does this happen? Like, how does someone end up taking Uber rides in Russia? Anyway, I get all these requests to do podcasts, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, why not? Because I'm just going to sit there and talk on the thing as you do. You should talk about your 1Password one, actually. We'll come back to that. So I did this podcast, and I thought nothing of it, and then it went out, and then there were all these people online which were suddenly like, oh, I heard you on Reply All, and it was really cool. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of people. So I listened to it, and it was just really nicely produced, beautifully produced, actually. I mean, we both do a lot of podcasts where it's just like literally us and one other person, and you're talking. It's kind of like this. It's unedited. It's unedited.
It's unprofessional.
But this was really nicely produced, and ever since then I've just listened to it. I think every single one since that time. So, for example, they did one where there's, the scam calls for Windows Computer.
Yeah.
It's like, someone
I
calls
love
up, usually from India. Sorry, guys, but look, it is usually from India. They call up and they go, oh, your computer's got viruses. And then you're like, oh, no, it's got viruses. And eventually they try and get remote control of your machine, and then they charge you money. And the Reply All guys, they did a 2-part episode. They actually went to India to try and track them down.
That's like Miko and going to, was it Pakistan?
To Pakistan, yeah. So Miko Huppinen went to Pakistan to find the guy who wrote like the first virus.
That's really cool.
He does
video.
a really interesting talk about it. So good stuff on Miko. Watch his TED talk on that actually. So anyway,
Did they find them?
Reply was well. Yes,
This is the crucial part.
They did actually find. I don't want to sort of blow the punchline.
Okay,
'cause,
no
it'd be good
spoilers.
to listen to it. They did actually find them, and it was sort of what you'd expect to be in terms of quasi-shady operation. But just listen to it; it's really interesting. So they pinged me the other day, and they said, "Look, we got this really, really interesting story, and I'm not going to give away the details because I actually listened to it in the car today." And the headline here. So this is episode number 141. The title of it is Adam Pisces and the $2 Coke. And effectively the scenario they paint is that Domino's Pizzas, one of your favourites.
It's not a I order it one time and it's my favourite.
I don't think it's been. I've heard it more than once with you. This is despite like good alternative. Anyway, we'll move on. Domino's Pizzas kept getting these orders for a Coke. Now, this is like an online order for a Coke. So someone would place an order and it's like, I would like a Coke, and that's it.
For like delivery order online? Just
No,
like a
pick
normal...
up. Pick up.
Okay.
And the premise of this was, or I guess what made it curious, is like, why would you order a Coke? And then the person would never turn up to pick up their Coke, but it's like just a Coke, who cares? It'd be different if they were ordering like a large Hawaiian pizza every time.
And were they paying for it, or was it like a pay and
Cash on delivery.
Okay.
Or cash on pickup. So their premise was there is someone ordering Cokes for $2, and you'll hear when you listen to the podcast. I think I come in at like half an hour point, and they sort of interview other people beforehand, and I'm sort of saying to them, okay, so like what rate is this order happening at? And they're like, it might be like one every few days or something for a Domino's store. So okay, well this is not effectively
Not spamming.
trying to spam you or
yeah.
put a financial burden on you. It's just like, just order a Coke. But what made it interesting is that this same Adam Pisces person is ordering the same $2 Coke at all of these different Domino's. And they're actually speaking to Domino's people, and this is in the podcast, and they're like, yeah, this is the thing. And then one of them, speaks to a manager, is like, we can't talk to you anymore. And so, wow, is there like an Adam Pisces conspiracy? So anyway, have a listen to that, because it was just a really interesting podcast, and I won't sort of spoil the conclusion. Just listen to it and see what you think. I'll put a link to it. So yeah, you can listen to it too. It is actually genuinely interesting.
I have some long haul flight coming up.
All right, you'll have time. Data breaches. So more data breaches than have I been pwned. Morele.net. Is it a French thing? I knew I was going to load some stuff beforehand. Morele. So if I go to have I been pwned, look at the most recent breaches. Morele.net had 2.5 million records breached in October. Exposed data included email addresses, names, and passwords stored as MD5 crypt hashes. Yay. 42% of addresses already in Have I Been Pwned. It's actually a Polish site, so it's like a Polish e-commerce site. There's a really long write-up here, which is in Polish, strangely enough, about what happened. That's gone into Have I Been Pwned. The other one's gone into Have I Been Pwned, and this one's actually, it's curious. Like, look at how many retweets this has. So there's 150 retweets on this next one. There was only 90 on the one before, 89 on the one before that. This is actually the most retweets I've had for many, many, many different data breaches. Whoops. And it is Club Penguin rewritten. Do you know what Club Penguin is? Dude, you haven't lived.
Club Penguin.
Club Penguin.
Is this Club Penguin?
I know where your
Can't
mind's
even
going.
hazard
No,
a
it's
guess.
not that
I
kind
can't
of...
hazard a guess live on recording.
It's not that kind of club. They're over there. So Club Penguin is actually, it seems to be like a Disney game. And what's happened is various services have taken this Disney game and then they've made like their own versions of it. And there seems to be like this really big following around Club Penguin. And Club Penguin Rewritten is a site that had a data breach. So we'll give you the sort of the facts first, and then we'll talk about the controversy. 1.7 million records breached in Jan last year. Exposed data included email and IP addresses, usernames and passwords stored as bcrypt hashes. Yay, good for them. 41% of the addresses already in Have I Been Pwned. Now, I have, when I published this, I got all of these people contacting me going, and when I say contacting me, like loads of DMs, probably a couple of dozen different people. There's all of this controversy around Club Penguin Rewritten, where it's like, I was a mod on this site and then someone else did something mean to me and I left and I was upset. And then someone's like, I'm a mod on this site now, these other guys are bastards. It's just like all this controversy from, I take it, I think some of them are children, like teenagers, some of them are probably very young adults, but there's just all of like this Club Penguin Rewritten controversy about not treating people nicely. I don't know, it just ended up like a childish bickering kind of...
Just what we...
Jeez. This is why I'm off Twitter. Mostly off Twitter. So anyway, Club Penguin Rewritten is up there. Okay, so next thing. This guy.
Again.
TikTok Track. So, last week we spoke about TikTok Track. We covered all the background about the vulnerabilities, the IDORs. We spoke about insecure direct object references, which is basically InfoSec 101, software development 101, really. It's like, if you want to make sure that when someone requests a record with an ID, they only get their record, you have to check that it's only their record. If you don't, then you have an IDOR. So they were offline when we spoke last. They came back online on Monday. So they were offline for about a week in total. Now, there's new news that you don't know yet. So I'm going to tell you this on air.
Set up.
And then you can sort of draw your own conclusions about this. So they came back online later on Monday. On Tuesday, they sent a message to everyone and sort of said, hey, we're back online. Okay, good news. It is back online. It is working now. Now, there were kind of several things along the way. And obviously, you and I had many chats over many beers about some of their messaging and the appropriateness of it.
Yeah.
And I think last week when we did the update as well, I sort of said, look, I appreciate the lady who runs this service has basically found herself out of her depth in terms of never having experienced a data breach kind of scenario before, or a vulnerability scenario before, hasn't really known how to respond, has made some comments that probably weren't the best comments with the benefit of hindsight. Now, I showed you one of those comments, and don't repeat it here because you'll understand why in a moment. I showed you one of those comments in a press release, and a journalist had sent me this press release and said, look, have a read of this. And it was not a very nice comment about Ken and I. So Ken Munro, the guy from Pentest Partners, a mutual friend of ours who found the vulnerability, very, very straight shooter, straight up guy, very often on TV, presentable, did everything right, as did I think it's probably fair to say. And the comment about both of us wasn't very nice, and we kind of had a bit of a chat about it and decided how far under the bus we should throw the company, because it's the sort of comment where it's like if you throw them, like they're going to be a long way and then they're going to go under all the wheels and they're going to come out not looking very good. And it will be Streisand and all that sort of stuff. Now Ken, and this is the bit that you don't know, Ken, because he's such a nice guy, got in touch with the lady behind this project and said, this is a comment in your press release. Are you really sure you want to make this comment? You can imagine how he would do it, right? Like, do you really want to go down this road?
But
anyway.
But press release already released, or press release?
Press release that had been sent to journalists, because a journalist sent me this release. In fact, she sent it to both Ken and I. It was a journalist who did cover the original story, and her basic premise was, this is a really, really shitty thing to say. Now, it turns out this is not what she wanted to say. And the lady is Karen Cantwell, who started the project.
So what she said was not what she wanted to say.
Correct. Now, I'm going to explain why. And again, we're not going to say what it was because she didn't mean to say it, and we don't want to throw her under the bus for this.
I said it. I didn't know we could do this. This is great. I said a thing I didn't mean to say.
So...
Can we just
pull
those words back
Here's
in?
the comment the journalists who queried on them got back, and I think it's fair to share this publicly. Incidentally, there was the comment about Ken and I. There was also a private email Ken had sent them that had been screen capped and then put in the press release. Now, just as I'm not going to say what they said in that original communication, which they obviously didn't mean to, that just feels...
Yeah,
it's not quite right, is it?
No. Not when... No, yeah. I'd
All
expect
right.
some privacy there.
So I literally titled this, Thing I Can't Say About. But the statement that came back is, on behalf of, and then the name of the communications company, and TikTok Track, I would like to retract the statement that was sent to you from... person whose name I won't mention, wasn't Karen, earlier this week. Karen Cantwell from TikTok Track did not approve this particular statement. This was a first draft and not the official statement that was distributed to the media on the 16th of April 2019. So basically what's happening is the messaging that's going out is written by a PR company. She's not actually approving all of it and it's still going out. So we're left here going, well, hang on a moment, so what do we believe?
There's a couple of things there that are a bit too much of a stretch, right? Like if you have a PR company like drafting things and speaking on your behalf and they send something out, like there should be a process there that, either they're sent out without approval and we're okay with that, or they have approval and the PR company broke that.
Look, I know PR companies are a thing, but there's just something that feels totally dirty to me about someone else writing the things that you then put your name to. I had someone the other day who said...
Especially without approval.
Well, I think the without approval bit was someone cocked up somewhere. But even if it was with approval, so I had someone reach out the other day wanting to do a similar thing for me. So we'd like your comments on a blog. We'll write your comments for you. You just approve them. And
But then they're not my comments.
No, they're not my comments.
Thank you for coming.
And we have a very high degree of candor, I guess, you and I. And we will sit here and what you see here, when we turn the camera off, we're going to be having the same discussion.
With the beers over there.
Yeah,
Where are the beers?
The beers. They're still good. But honestly, what you see here is what you get, and everyone that meets us knows that there is no veneer. There's nothing else. Now we're not always.
I hope people get that.
Yeah, look, I think people do. Like everyone we know gets that. I hope these organisations get this. But I guess what upset me a little bit is you're making a product, you're selling it to children, you're talking about how authentic and everything you are, but then someone else is writing your statements. And they're releasing them, and they're not even yours, and you obviously don't know what's going out as well. Imagine if Ken hadn't have done the nice thing. Honestly, if this had gone out into the public, they'd be absolutely freaking crucified, and they would have dug themselves in even further.
We would have absolutely saying things that I think aren't cool.
Yep.
I'm just going to pile on because we need to temper that. We can't keep having companies just slinging dirt around the place, which seems to happen a lot.
I'm glad you mentioned slinging dirt around the place. So, oh boy, where do we go here? Actually, one other thing on TikTok Track, and then we'll move on to the other watchmaker. When they went back online, I'm going to ask you your opinion. I know you've given it to me before. We'll do it for the camera as well. When they went back online on Monday, and I said on Tuesday they made a statement. In the first paragraph, and actually let me give you the chronology here. So remember, Ken sent them a message, let's get this right, Friday before last. So on a Friday afternoon he sent the message. On the Monday they took the service offline, so obviously it was a serious thing.
Yeah.
They planned to go back, I think, on the Wednesday. They end up sending a message saying, no, look, we're actually not ready. And we kind of went, okay, well, that's good insofar as take the time to do this, right? And then they said, look, we'll go back online on the Monday. So it was either the Wednesday or the Thursday last week. They said they'll be back online Monday this week.
Okay.
Their message from Tuesday in the first paragraph says this.
Oh.
You know what's coming. We had hoped to have the system back up online earlier. However, the recent tragic events in Sri Lanka, brackets, where the majority of our development team are located, meant that things were delayed while we ensured that our team and their families were safe and well. Now, just for the chronology, and then you can give me your comments on this. Remember, last week, Wednesday, Thursday, I can't remember the exact date, they said they will be back online on Monday. Sunday afternoon, Australia time, was the Sri Lanka events, which, were tragic by any reasonable measure. And then Monday, they went back online per schedule. How did you feel when you read this comment?
It just doesn't... I don't feel like there's a place anywhere in a press release of that nature to mention an event like that. Even if... I guess it feels bad because they're ultimately...
But was it her comments?
Well, yeah, there's that whole argument,
the
but
thing.
it's like... look, I kind of feel like they're mentioning it so that no one will ask questions, right? Because it's like such a sensitive topic. It's like, hey, if we, put this thing in here, then no one will come back and ask any questions of us.
For you and I sitting here talking
Yeah,
about it, we've already established that we're very candid about these things.
I just feel like it was a kind of a distraction technique. I'm not sure what the exact word is, but it's like, hey, we'll take this really terrible thing and we'll mention that because it'll stop people asking questions later because it's such a terrible thing.
Yeah, but it feels dirty, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, there's just as soon as it's like line 2 of the thing or something. I think
Yeah, like it was right up front. It's,
no.
won't someone please think of the children? It just feels really wrong, and I don't think we're clutching at straws by saying that. And when it's, how much of this is the PR agency? Seriously, we just established that the PR agency is sending crap out.
I get that, but if I pay someone to speak on my behalf, then I'm responsible for the things that they say.
All right, so I think this is really important. If you pay someone to build software on your behalf, you're responsible. If you pay people to say things on your behalf, you're responsible.
Well, yeah,
that's responsible or accountable, because there is you're accountable.
Okay, you're accountable. I can agree with. Like, if they build terrible software that has a vulnerability, like they're responsible for the vulnerability, but you're accountable for it.
Exactly.
I agree with that. That's okay.
So I think that was. Man, this is a professional communications company. I honestly don't know what they're doing. Maybe the trick here is that we need like a dedicated, and I don't have a service to sell this, by the way, just to be clear, but it's almost like you need a dedicated like data breach security vulnerability communications company that just knows what is the wrong signaling.
That's fine.
Databreachcommunications.com. 5 minutes after this goes out, that's going to be registered. All right, now we'll move on to the next thing that's related to this. Now, when this blog post of both mine and Pentest Partners went out about all the different vulnerabilities and things, obviously the media picked it up, a lot of attention there. Lots of questions were raised about the broader ecosystem of children's tracking watches. Because if you look back through the history, and I know I put this sort of up front in my blog post as well, there have been a lot of kids tracking watches that have had a lot of serious security vulnerabilities in them. And it's kind of like if you have a cheap product made to be sold mass market without much security review, it's like, honestly, what do you think is going to happen? So big questions were raised about the industry in general. Now, one of the people that made, or rather raised these questions was a guy called Ben Grubb, who's a reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald. And he wrote a blog post, a news story, which would have been in print media, it was on online media, it's syndicated between multiple newspapers in Australia, it would have got a lot of traction. And it started, the headline was, "I would never buy one of these watches." Now, that was actually a quote from me when he said to you, "Troy, would you ever buy one of these watches?" I was like, "No, I would never buy one of these watches."
Apart from the watch over there.
All right, this is exceptional. I bought this watch for research purposes. I'd throw it in the ocean, except I don't think it would actually work anymore if I did that, because if they get...
And the dolphins, like...
Dolphins, jet skis, whatever. Anywho, so he sort of raised questions about the broader industry. Now, there is a company called MGM Wireless, and MGM Wireless makes a product called Spacewatch. Now, Spacewatch is in this class. Now, what Ben has done is he has raised questions about the entire class of watch. Now, MGM Wireless, and this is now on the 19th, so we're back, this is actually 1 week ago now. They tweeted here and they said, 5 years we spent building Spacetalk. Does it take 5 years to build?
5 years.
I can imagine how someone would take 5 years. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it's more complex than what we know. Spacetalk to be the most secure and dependable kids' smartwatch to keep kids safe. 2 kids in the one sentence. Sounds weird, just putting it out there. We've been telling everyone that many others out there aren't. TikTok Track isn't the only one out there that's insecure, at Ben Grubb. So, what's the first thing you think of when you see this?
If you need to advertise your own product by pointing out deficiencies in other people's products, like, I'm immediately on a not great footing.
Smells bad.
It sounds like he's trying to say, "Oh, look, everyone else is terrible, so you should buy us because we're less terrible."
There are a lot more
where's
money.
Where's he going with that?
To me, like, the first thing that sort of got me is it feels a bit ambulance chasing. I'm just looking at some of the responses here. Leslie Carhart, Hacks for Pancakes, who's a very, very smart InfoSec lady. She made a comment here, says this is a rather risky gamble from a security perspective. I wonder if what she's
pen tester,
implying
everyone.
exactly. Every time an organisation sort of says we're unhackable or we're so, and in fairness, they didn't say we're unhackable, but they did talk about how secure they are. They do
It's
tend
like the
to get
giant
free pen
bullseye,
tests.
like just, you know.
Someone else chimes in. Can you smell that challenge? Hope you've got security email working. Can imagine you're going to get a disclosure from Pentest partners. Laughing, crying face. Someone else challenge accepted. Now, who knows? Who knows? Anyway, so MGM made that comment. Now, there's then a guy called Mark Fortunatel.
Moment.
Let's call him Mark.
Yep.
So
Sorry.
Mark then quote tweets this. Now, Mark is the CEO of MGM. Let me just double check that. CEO and co-founder of children's wearable Space Talk. Okay, fine. Mark's quote tweeted says, I hope @BenGrub writes a follow-up article to explain not all kids' smartwatch phones,
Smartwatch phones?
all right, we have learned something, are unsafe and undo some of the stress he's caused to thousands of good Aussie families. Now, I'm not even going to ask you your opinion on this because I'm going to jump straight into mine. I have a fundamental problem with this, where someone's saying because, like, breach disclosure 101, how to do everything right, has been strictly followed predominantly by Ken and to a lesser degree myself, that's causing stress to people, and he's critical of that. Like, honestly, if you're, and Mark, geez, if you're watching this, look, this is not a good
No,
move.
but he's not.
This is not a good move at all, because you're basically saying it is not right to raise security vulnerabilities about a thing. Now, look, maybe he's a bit more critical of Ben because Ben did cast aspersions across the whole industry, but that's because the whole industry has been kind
But
of
there's
shit.
a foundation for that, right? Yeah.
I mean, there's all of these good references here about why there's been so many problems. The industry has got a major issue. Now, after that, and I don't know if Mark controls his account. It's kind of weird because MGM Wireless tweeted, Mark quote tweeted, and then MGM
They've
Wireless has replied to Mark's tweet and says, is this directly in reply to Mark's tweet or?
Yep.
It is? Yeah, well, that's really weird. Anyway, maybe he's talking to himself. There may be a different problem. So MGM Wireless has replied to Mark, who's quote tweeted MGM Wireless, and said, I don't think you understand the problems you've caused. Parents buy these devices to keep their kids safe. Often they need to save up first to buy them because they're still quite expensive. You've thrown a reckless grenade at them. What's a reckless grenade?
As I was just going to say, as opposed to those helpful grenades that people throw at me.
What's a safe grenade? It's just like a grenade with the pin still in. Like, where are we going with this?
But I just don't agree. Like, yes, parents buy these devices to keep their kids safe, but they weren't, and they've been proven in many occasions not to. So,
but what's their point? It's like we would rather. Okay, their point is definitely we would rather you don't talk about this. But they've just gone on the one hand from going, this is good because it shows our competitors are kind of crap with their security, to the whole thing is reckless. I just don't kind of get where they're going with the whole thing.
no, there's definitely a split purpose there. Like, originally it sounded like they were going down the road of like, hey, everyone else's products are not secure, buy ours because they are. But then this is talking more about, like, more generalized now, saying you're making these watches look bad, which is bad for us because we sell the watches and you should fix that. Is that still the same thread?
I'm just
I
losing
can't-
track. But like when you read through this thread, like the responses are just. You know what gets me more than anything is that these companies, including these tweets from MGM and Mark and whoever, they just really don't get the way this industry works, and they're making products and selling them, and security is an issue, and then they don't understand.
And I can see how
You
they
know?
got there, but that doesn't excuse it, right? Like, I can totally understand how they got to where they are, but that doesn't make it okay. It's like, you know, they've still got to grasp this stuff.
I guess what we want to see, and if I speak for both of us, and tell me if you disagree with any of this, but I want to see companies that build these products with the best of intentions, when there's an issue with them, to own it and go, hey, we screwed this up. I still don't think I've seen from TikTok Track an acknowledgement that they screwed up. You know, and whether it's them or whether it's
Like
the Sri
an
Lankan vendor they
apology
outsource to, I think I have seen them apologise. I'm just not sure that I've seen
For
acknowledgement.
the inconvenience of the watch not working.
It's like, look, you can't, like, just own the problem. You sold a product with a serious security vulnerability in it. Apologise, say that you've screwed up, whatever else. Stop blaming other people for your own mistake just because they've shone a light on the problem.
But this comes back to the whole dealing with the security disclosure things, right? Like there's so many examples of companies out there doing this terribly, and the cost that comes with, and then the companies that do this fantastically. And not that I'm saying that you can turn a security vulnerability into a positive thing. However, you can turn it into like a positive experience. Like no one's ever going to be like, yay, they got breached. However, I've seen companies get breached who have done fantastic disclosures and rundowns with the researchers and fixed it. And I feel more confident using them afterwards because I know that no one can be perfect. However, when something goes wrong, I want them to deal with it in the right way.
But I mean, this is the thing, and I think to your point, an organisation like the Australian Red Cross Blood Service, I have seen them consistently used as like the high watermark of breach disclosure. And they come out of it looking very good. Someone like TikTok Track or let's say Nomics. We won't delve. Just Google his name and Nomics. Another story. They don't come out looking so good. All right. So I'm kind of just getting very dark here. I knew we bought the extra light for a reason.
I was just looking at the video and I'm like, wow, that changed a lot. I don't look as tan.
You got very suddenly.
Sun tanning.
It's because you're English. Anyway, that's a different problem. Lastly, sponsorship this week is by Varonis. Now, Varonis is promoting a free course called The Enemy Within, made by yours truly. So I did a course for Varonis some time ago. They did pay me to do it. I was very clear about that at the time. It is available to everyone to go and watch for free. And this was about insider threats. And when I was looking at this today, I was like, oh, you know what? I just remembered one of the things in there which I thought was really cool. And I'm pretty sure you know this story. Remember, and just to put it in context, when we talk about insider threats, we're talking about people within the organisation who pose a threat. Sometimes by malice because they're trying to sell the data. Sometimes they might get blackmailed or they might have the screws turned, proverbially, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's just because they screw up. Do you remember the story about the guy who outsourced his job to China?
Oh,
so I went and looked this up again. So there was this story, and this was quite a few years ago now, but I'm pretty sure I put it in the Varonis course. I was going to read you the first couple of paras here because this was an insider who decided to outsource his job to China. So there's this BBC piece, and I will link to it. It says, a security check on a US company has reportedly revealed one of its staff was outsourcing his work to China. The software developer, in his 40s, is thought to have spent his workdays surfing the web, watching cat videos on YouTube, and browsing Reddit and eBay. He reportedly paid just a fifth of his six-figure salary to a company based in Shenyang to do his job. I
applaud his
you would like honestly
ingenuity of that.
If you could pay 20% of well, you don't really have a salary, but 20% of what you earn
the answer is already
to
yes.
someone else, you would do this.
Here's all my crap.
But this is an insider, and this is what's kind of in the Varonis course, where one of the threats is there is the inadvertent insider. Now, whether it's the person who's outsourcing their job to China in order to watch cat videos, or whether it's the person who opens the attachment when they didn't really expect to, it's like you have now just given all of your access rights. By the way, the guy in this story apparently shipped his secure IDs, like his physical token.
I was going to ask, were they VNCing onto his machine and stuff
they were VPNing in and using his 2FA token to get in. So apparently got away with it for a while too. But there are people within the organisation who may not have malicious intent. Now, he wasn't malicious, he was just stupid. That's a different thing. You probably have people in your organisation who are stupid. You know who I'm talking about. Let's not go there anymore. Yeah, it's nice being unemployed, isn't it?
Yeah. So getting fired for that tomorrow. Oh, wait.
So anyway, that course is out there for free. Go and check out Varonis, and thank you to them for their support this week on the blog. You're actually going in 6 days from now. I'm thinking maybe we do, because we've got Thursday off next week. So I just realised we can actually see QT too. Yep. So the building right there is the one that we'll be in Monday, Tuesday. You're doing your workshop. I'm doing my workshop. Wednesday, we're both doing talks. We're doing the new Cyberbroken talk. This will be in it.
And no crashes.
Time. Hopefully not. And then Thursday night Oz time, you're gonna head home. So we might even try and do this during the day on Thursday, so I can pump this out on the Friday. And then you and I will next do this probably in London in June.
It's like is it? No. What
Oh
about
no,
when
no,
I'm
you'll be
here?
back
Also
here.
a
Yeah,
week,
you'll be back here.
I'm
'Cause
going all the way home.
We got
to
to
do
go to
thing
the other
come back
building just there.
yeah,
No.
literally from that one to that one.
Yeah.
That one.
Ah, no, some of that. All right, thank you for watching, and I hope that has been an interesting update. See you.
See you later.